You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 9th of January 2015. Rotherham scandal police force brings in 62 new investigators. Paris kosher market seized in second hostage drama in nervous France. US military to close 3 bases in Britain, causing hundreds of job losses for local civilian workers. Thought for the day, much ado about something or nothing. And finally, 2 for 1 day Friday. UK news. Rotherham scandal police force brings in 62 new investigators. The police force at the centre of the Rotherham child sex scandal is to bring in 62 new officers and staff to investigate abuse against vulnerable people. South Yorkshire's Police and Crime Commissioner Alan Billings promised that more people will be prosecuted for subjecting children to sex abuse after expanding the county force's public protection units. A report by Professor Alexis Jay into the scandal revealed that more than 1,400 children had been subjected to child sexual exploitation in the town between 1997 and 2013. The damning report criticised the way South Yorkshire Police and Rotherham Council dealt with complaints from teenage girls who said they'd been raped and trafficked by gangs of mainly Asian men. Dr Billings told Phil Williams on BBC Radio 5 Live that more staff are being drafted in to bring the perpetrators of the crimes to justice. The extra workers will be made up of 43 police officers and 19 support staff. He said there have been prosecutions. There are going to be some more prosecutions. I'm increasing the number of people who are involved in child sexual exploitation investigations, so there will be further prosecutions. Pressed on how many additional officers are being brought in, he added, just over 60 additional people we're putting in. That's in addition to numbers that have already been put in during the course of last year. But this year there'll be another 62 being trained. But he warned it would be immensely difficult to piece the cases together and bring them to court. He said often the people who have been victims in the past, who were victims of grooming, wouldn't recognise that they were being groomed at the time. Some of them don't recognise it now. Some want prosecutions, some just want to go and live their lives and not have it all raked up. So it's very complicated and very difficult and requires a lot of sensitivity on the part of those officers who were investigating. In a statement released today, Dr Billings said he was allocating an extra £2.3 million to tackle the increasing workload and responsibility in areas such as domestic abuse, management of sex offenders, child sexual exploitation, child abuse and online protection referrals. The money will come from the force's 2015-16 budget after the issue was made a priority by the newly elected Crime Commissioner, meaning savings will have to be found elsewhere. World at 8, oh I love it. Asian men and vulnerable girls. I wish they would stop repeating themselves and come out with the truth. Muslim men and badly brought up and indoctrinated girls. This problem will only go away when the Muslims do. European news. Paris kosher market seized in second hostage drama in nervous France. A gunman seized a kosher grocery store Friday and took hostages in a second standoff as police outside the French capital surrounded the country's most wanted terrorist suspects. There were conflicting reports about whether anyone had been killed at the store. The Agence France Presse News agency earlier reported that at least 2 people were killed. French media said at least 5 people were taken captive. It is not immediately clear whether the hostage-taking was linked to this week's bloodshed that has put the country on edge. I have learnt with horror of a hostage-taking that has started at Port de Vincennes, Port de Vincennes, and I'm going there immediately, Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo wrote on Twitter. But suspects in the fatal shooting of a policewoman on Thursday remained at large. Authorities also said there appeared to be a connection between the slaying and the terrorist storming of a satirical newspaper on Wednesday that left 12 people dead. France's anti-terrorism prosecutor says a shooting and hostage-taking attack is underway at a kosher market on the eastern edge of Paris. A police official said there are multiple hostages and wounded at the scene. Hayat Boumediene, a 26-year-old woman, and Amedi Koulibaly, a 32-year-old man, are suspected to be armed and dangerous, according to the French police, and are being sought in connection with the Thursday killing of a female police officer in Paris. The police said they believe the killing was a terrorist enterprise. Several ambulances were seen rushing towards the grocery store where the hostage-taking took place hours before the Jewish Sabbath, starting on a Friday night, a particularly busy time for a kosher shop. Riot police set up positions near the grocery in the Port-de-Vincennes neighbourhood on the eastern outskirts of Paris. Helicopters passed overhead and ambulances raced to the scene. According to a police source cited by France 24 television, at least one person was wounded at the store Hypercaché or Hyperkosher. Outside the capital, thousands of police cornered the two suspects in Wednesday's attack at the offices of the Paris weekly newspaper Charlie Hebdo. Like the two suspects in the Charlie Hebdo attack, Koulibaly appears to have been well known to French authorities for years before Thursday's killing of the policewoman on a quiet Paris street. World at 8. Apparently there's another situation at a printing factory nearby with the two terrorists from Hebdo. Still ongoing, I'm afraid. If it were us Brits, we would be sitting outside with cups of tea, taking the bastards in pizzas and reading them their human rights. World news. US military to close 3 bases in Britain, causing hundreds of job losses for local civilian workers. The US military is to shrink its presence in Britain, closing 3 bases and slashing thousands of roles as part of a major shake-up of its overseas deployments. The closure of RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk alongside RAF Alconbury and RAF Molesworth in Cambridgeshire will see the number of US military personnel drop by around 2,000. Hundreds of British civilian workers will also lose their jobs as part of the cost-cutting. Pentagon officials said that the US presence at RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, the largest US Air Force combat base in Europe, will be beefed up with 2 squadrons comprising 48 of the new Lockheed Martin Lightning II Joint Strike Fighters, which will arrive by 2020. The closures are expected to save £320 million, which is $500 million, a year across Europe, US Defence Secretary Chuck Hagel said. He added, I know this will result in a reduction of our local host nations' workforces at some locations. I value the tremendous support they have provided for us for decades. Pentagon was understood to be concerned that Lakenheath and Mildenhall were too far away from Middle East trouble spots such as Iraq and Syria. But recent events in Ukraine and the potential for a new Cold War with Russia may have prompted a rethink, with the 48th Fighter Wing considered a vital outpost of US air power able to deploy its jets anywhere in the world with fewer than 24 hours notice. The change in US presence comes as Britain's government is under pressure to retain 2% of its annual spending on defence. Independent government analyst Howard Weldon said, the decision by the US is an object lesson for the UK government, just as it is for those of our NATO allies, that we must place a much greater emphasis on ensuring we have sufficient capability to defend ourselves. World at 8. The EU, NATO and our governments ensure that we do not spend what we should on defence. We've been cutting back for years to pay foreign aid and immigration. We are in a worse position than we were before the Second World War, if possible. Thought for the day, much ado about something or nothing. Having watched and read the news about the Islamic atrocity in Paris, my sympathies are of course with the families of the bereaved. However, my other thought is that although terrible in itself, the media have spared no effort or time on splashing it all over their papers and the various newscasts, even going so far as to warn us in the UK that the same thing might occur and that we are all targets of the Islamic extremists. Whereas the plight of the Yazidis in Iraq and the subsequent vanishing of that problem caused by Islamic extremism in their own country didn't raise so much as an eyebrow on the media penny dreadfuls. It could be that the left is holding sway even over international terrorism because the Charlie Hebdo massacres took place within an organisation well known for its Marxist anti-religious views and not the synagogues or churches in that city. And we all know that leftists can never be tackled without tremendous comebacks, whereas all religions can be under attack without recrimination. It is all in the plan of ironing out entire countries to within inches of their lives, within a set format of no religion, no family, no sovereignty, no individual powers and no industries or farming to negate the absence of the rest. In short, a corridor country within other corridor countries that supply the hive with workers. Now, I do not subscribe to this at all, but then neither do I subscribe to the mayhem and cruelty of an Islamic republic, or in this case around 20 of them in Europe. I am all for people adhering to a religion as a way of life in their own backyard, but not in my backyard. I frankly sympathise, but that is all, on the child marriages, slavery, sex trafficking and female genital mutilation carried out in their countries, but don't want to see it or hear of it in my country. Especially when thousands of our own young underage girls are to this day still being raped and abused and sold out by these same Muslims in my country. And I have never seen a display of outrage on that on the front of the Mail or indeed inside for 3 full pages. It would never happen in today's climate of diversity and multi-immigration. The warning that we could be next will fall on deaf ears in the UK as we are all revving up for elections and all that entails. The safety of our towns and cities will just be a second thought as we still allow in and indeed encourage thousands more Muslims into this country. I haven't yet worked out if it is because the Brits are inherently lazy or just a sort of unbiased stupidity that we shouldn't really be nasty to the Muslims as we have them to thank for slavery and wars for the last 1,000 years. Another comment was from Simon Heffer that France has not treated its Muslim populations fairly. One example of this was that they ghettoised them into banlieues in the northern suburbs. Tough! We've let them into our capital city of London and they practically run it and own it now. The French know how to handle immigrants generally by sending them post-haste into Kent. They are apparently paying the price of colonisation in Algeria and North Africa, just as we, of course, are paying the price of colonising India, Arabia, Africa, China and all of Europe, judging by our intake of migrants over the last 50 years. But should we and should the French? No, because if we are to believe all that is trumpeted around about human beings and migrations, there have been migrations throughout the known history of this planet. But even the idiots who think this is wunderbar must see that entire countries migrating to smaller countries, thousands of miles away from their own cultures and civilizations, does not bode well on the calmer side at all. The result of massive Muslim immigration into the honeypots of the West will result in Paris again and again and again. Heffer joins the pundits over the woes we, the West, have inflicted on the poor Muslims. From the idiocy of Iraq to the idiocy of Afghanistan and the ills of colonising Africa and North Africa. Well, all we did was transport the slaves of the Arabs and indeed their own neighbouring tribes sold us as workers. Not pleasant, but it has 2 good points. One, the States now has the real problem of just too many Africans, and many of those who, had they stayed in Africa, would have died from disease or AIDS in today's world, to say nothing of Ebola. Colonisation was a result of the various European countries becoming more seaworthy, and the sad results are of course obvious. Look at what the Spanish have done to South America and Mexico. Slums and multi-lack of culture everywhere. The indigenous Indians gone. They didn't perform so well in the Far East, did they? Look at the sodding Filipinos. Worst of both races there. No wonder the Yanks gave them their independence and they've been running ever since back into Europe and the States. The British have more than paid for any wrongdoings they may have committed, as we are in truth completely overrun with foreigners today, most of which have no allegiance to either the Crown or our country, and indeed we have set up the most prolific industry since the last war, that of breeding our own homegrown Islamic terrorists. It's no chance that the average Muslim woman will have 4 to 5 brats. Even if you're a dunce, that doesn't even compare to our meagre 1.2 progeny. And they wonder why the NHS is under attack. It isn't the white elderly, it's the migrants for the most part. But this, like the Yazidis, will never be mentioned in whatever white paper or TV investigation they get up to. Ethnics or Muslims are never, ever mentioned in public. And it is this secrecy that has bred this form of terrorism in Europe. The simple rewriting of history after the Second World War was not enough. We had to change populations and ignore that to really come into the Bilderberg Charter of good deeds. Paris is just the beginning, as drummer Rigby was the beginning for us. Things can never go back to what they were because they were nothing, a sham built on grains of sand, whereupon an entire population of a country were hoodwinked into accepting millions of total strangers onto our land without any question or rules or guidance. In Paris they attacked a neutral target for the French. Many French are Roman Catholic and not anti-religion, but also in a sense the Islamists killed the root of what they perceived to be their problem, critiques of their prophet Muhammad. Now, to get this clear, M is not my prophet and I do not adhere to his teachings. So how come Islam is so powerful it can destroy a national icon because of its drawings? Heffer believes the Muslim minority in France have been treated unfairly. What did he think of the Lee Rigby murder? Was it because these two African Muslims had been treated unfairly, not given vast houses to live in, not educated on the state, fed and watered by British taxpayers? Wake up, Heffer. It doesn't matter if Muslims are made to live out of capital cities. It doesn't matter where they live. They turn it into hellholes anyway. Europe has succeeded in doing what Hitler never did or tried to do. Kill 6 million Jews and communists and replace them in 70 years with 80 million Muslims, most of whom, whether we care to believe it or not, are radicalised by virtue of their religion and by the book by which they live, the Quran. Any good Muslim will abide by this book. However educated he may be, when push comes down to shove, he will do what that book says. Kill the unbelievers. It is not scaremongering, it is fact. There is a commentary today in the Mail by Dr. Taj Hargay, director of the Muslim Educational Centre at Oxford University, who says that killers betray Islam and all Muslims. In short, a brief denial in writing. Many Russians hated Stalin, but they still killed in his name. Many Germans didn't follow the Führer, but they killed in his name. Many Chinese didn't follow Mao Zedong, but they killed in his name. Many Japanese hadn't even heard of the Emperor Hirohito, but they killed in his name. We are all like Chamberlain, waving a bit of paper, placating the great beast, and saying we are good children and there are no monsters. There are. And they have already shown their faces to us. Is denial a river in Africa? Is it ever? And finally, 2 for 1 Day Friday. Children writing about the ocean. Listen to this and next time you take an oceanography course you will be totally prepared. This is a picture of an octopus. It has 8 testicles. Kelly, age 6. Oysters' balls are called pearls. Jerry, age 6. If you're surrounded by ocean, you're an island. If you don't have ocean all around you, you are incontinent. Mike, age 7. Sharks are ugly and mean and have big teeth, just like Emily Richardson. She's not my friend anymore. Kylie, age 6. A dolphin breathes through an asshole on top of its head. Billy, aged 8. My uncle goes out with his boat with 2 other men and a woman and pots and comes back with crabs. Millie, aged 6. When ships had sails, they used to use the trade winds to cross the ocean. Sometimes when the winds didn't blow, the sailors would whistle to make the wind come. My brother said they would have been better off eating beans. William, aged 7. Mermaids live in the ocean. I like mermaids. They're beautiful and I like their shiny tails. But how on earth do mermaids get pregnant? Like really? Helen, aged 6. I'm not going to write about the ocean. My baby brother's always crying, my dad keeps yelling at my mum, and my big sister has just got pregnant, so I can't think what to write. Amy, aged 6. Some fish are dangerous. Jellyfish can sting. Electric eels can give you a shock. They have to live in caves under the sea where I think they have to plug themselves into chargers. Christopher, aged 7. When you go swimming in the ocean, it's very cold and it makes my willy small. Kevin, aged 6. Divers have to be safe when they go underwater. They can't go down alone, so they have to go down on each other. Becky, aged 8. On vacation, my mum went water skiing. She fell off when she was going very fast. She says she won't do it again because water fired right up her big fat ass. Julie, aged 7. The ocean is made up of water and fish. Why the fish don't drown, I don't know. Bobby, aged 6. My dad was a sailor on the ocean. He knows all about the ocean. What he doesn't know is why he quit being a sailor and married my mum. James, aged 7. And if you have rusty nuts after Christmas. This was an advert for WD-40. And believe me, it's a true one. Do you have tight nuts or a rusty tool? Then use WD-40 in the man-size pressure pack. Stands 9 inches high, diameter, complete with... This, believe it or not, was a proper advert put in many years ago for WD-40. I read it. Do you have tight nuts or a rusty tool? Then use WD-40 in the man-size pressure pack. Stands 9 inches high with diameter, complete with red knobs. Makes old tools like new again. Tools slide in and out with ease. Lubricates dry passageways. Makes screwing a pleasure. Gives better penetration. Buy some, try some, keep a spare pack in your car for emergencies. WD-40, it's good stuff. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend in the town between 1997 and 2013. The damning report criticised the way South Yorkshire Police and Rotherham Council dealt with complaints from teenage girls who said they'd been raped and trafficked by gangs of mainly Asian men. Dr Billings told Phil Williams on BBC Radio 5 Live that more staff are being drafted in to bring the perpetrators of the crimes to justice. The extra workers will be made up of 43 police officers and 19 support staff. He said there have been The police force at the centre of the Rotherham child sex scandal is to bring in 62 new officers and staff to investigate abuse against vulnerable people. South Yorkshire's Police and Crime Commissioner Alan Billings promised that more people will be prosecuted for subjecting children to sex abuse after expanding the county force's public protection units. A report by Professor Alexis Jay into the scandal revealed that more than 1,400 children had been subjected to child sexual exploitation.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 9th of January 2015. Rotherham scandal police force brings in 62 new investigators. Paris kosher market seized in second hostage drama in nervous France. US military to close 3 bases in Britain, causing hundreds of job losses for local civilian workers. Thought for the day, much ado about something or nothing. And finally, 2 for 1 Day Friday. UK news. Rotherham scandal police force brings in 62 new investigators. Prosecutions. There are going to be some more prosecutions. I'm increasing the number of people who are involved in child sexual exploitation investigations, so there will be further prosecutions. Pressed on how many additional officers are being brought in, he added, just over 60 additional people we're putting in. That's in addition to numbers that have already been put in during the course of last year. But this year there'll be another 62 being trained. But he warned it would be immensely difficult to piece the cases together and bring them to court.